June 1944 Normandy 1st U.S. Army Gen. Omar N. Bradley against German 7th Army Gen. Friedrich Dollmann. Hedgerows, damp fields, sunken lanes. A column, edges forward. Not tanks first, not half-tracks. Jeeps. Dozens. Then more behind them, fender-to-fender canvas, tops rolled, blackout lamps, hooded antennas whipping. They hop ruts, ford puddles, nose past stalled lorries and keep going. Couriers duck under telephone lines. Medical litters ride crosswise on hood brackets. A radio jeep idles in a hedgerow shadow, SCR 510 humming handset clipped to a dash bracket. A pair of MPs, white helmets dusted green, wave the stream past. The line never stops. Before this, many German officers had snorted at the small American scout car. Too light, too tall, too exposed. A toy beside an SD, KFZ 250. They had words for it in reports, primitive, flimsy civilian. Then the front flooded. North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, the Low Countries, Germany, islands across the Central and Southwest Pacific. Everywhere the jeep appeared it multiplied. Snow chains in the Ardennes, tarpaulin roofs in the rain, sand channels on a Tunisian wadi bank. It arrived in crates, rolled off ships, roared out of depots, and turned up at every battalion command post like an inevitable answer. The frame was narrow, the wheelbase short, the weight low enough that 4 men could drag a stuck jeep sideways out of a ditch. The heart was the Willys L-134 Go Devil, a flathead 4 rated about 60 horsepower, simple carburetor, simple lines, simple fixes. The windshield folded flat. The grille was a stamped steel 9-slot face on Willys MBs, a pressed bar version on early prototypes, then the familiar slotted stamp on standard MB and Ford GPW. Nothing on it was fancy. Everything on it was reachable with 2 wrenches and a screwdriver. The origin story did not begin in a barrage but in a spec sheet. July 1940 the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps issued a compact 4-ton 4x4 requirement to American industry. Bantam, a struggling small automaker, answered first with a prototype delivered to Camp Holabird in September 1940. It was quick, cheeky, raw. Willys Overland and Ford followed with their own pilots. Trials were brutal and fast. The Army liked pieces from each. The result was a standardized hybrid, Willys MB, and Ford GPW, a common pattern with interchangeable parts, serials, tracked manuals, standardized. 2 makers, 1 Jeep. That was the point. The logic was not elegance, it was scale. A vehicle that was good enough everywhere, fixable anywhere, and cheap to build in enormous numbers. Assembly lines in Toledo for Willys, lines at Ford plants for GPW, crating systems that broke the Jeep down into shipping modules bolted to wood, wrapped for salt air, marked for theatre and unit. A depot crew on a Pacific pier could uncrate, bolt, fill fluids, and send a Jeep up the beach within an hour. A motorpool corporal in Italy could swap a transmission between a Willys and a Ford without checking the logo. Manuals were plain, torque values were printed, maintenance intervals were drilled into drivers. On the road, the Jeep felt fast because it was always working. Recon patrol at dawn, liaison run at noon, ammo and water to a forward company by dusk. A chaplain strapped a cross to the bumper and made last rites before a barrage. An artillery officer set a map board over the hood, spread grease pencil lines and corrected fire while the engine ticked. Medics lashed 2 litters to hood brackets, another across the rear, and crawled a casualty past clogged ambulances. A signal detachment bolted a mast to the rear crossmember, mounted an SCR 284 or SCR 510, and built a moving command post with range and speed. A man on a bicycle could not match. A light gun crew hooked a 37mm later, even a 57mm, and dragged it into a gap that a truck could not reach. In mud, in sand, on ruts, the little 4x4 kept clawing. German reports shifted tone. At first derision, then caution, then imitation and capture. Wehrmacht units marked seized jeeps with Balkenkreuz and drove them hard because spares existed by the crate load in Allied dumps, and the things simply ran. Panzer divisions used captured jeeps as courier and staff cars when fuel and parts allowed. Fallschirmjäger moved messages under tree cover where a motorcycle would have spilled. The machine they had mocked was now a prize to be kept, repainted, guarded. What made this possible was standardization. The two-letter codes on Ford frames, the Willys stampings matched to Ford drawings, tire sizes identical, spark plugs common, fuel lines that did not require a special flare tool. Everything thought through so a forward unit could cannibalize one Jeep to save 5. The army culture adapted around it. Drivers carried tool rolls. Sergeants enforced PMCS checklists. Quartermasters spread parts along the front like seed. The Jeep was not a talisman. It was a system made physical. Go back to the lane in Normandy. A German observer notes the sound, not one engine but many, light, insistent, layered. More columns arrive on the next road over on the track, beyond that behind the hedgerow line you cannot see. Each Jeep is a small promise that orders will arrive, that water will arrive, that wire will be laid, that wounded will be moved, that a map will find its way to the man who must decide. Mobility compounds. Tempo quickens. Skepticism runs out of road. July 1940, U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps writes a spec that reads like a Dara 1, 4-ton four-wheel drive reconnaissance car that can carry a squad's load, climb grades, ford streams, take a beating, and still be simple enough for a private with a tool roll to keep alive. Delivery timetable weeks, not months. Camp Holabird, Maryland will test whatever shows up. American Bantam answers first. In late September 1940, the Bantam reconnaissance car rattles into Holabird for trials. It is small, lively, easy to place on rutted ground, and fragile around the edges. The Army likes the idea, low silhouette, go anywhere, stance a platform for radios and runners, but wants more power, more parts, commonality, and a production base that can scale. Willys Overland brings the quad, Ford brings the Pygmy. Trials begin in earnest. Engineers swap notebooks with soldiers who actually bounce these rigs through sand, mud, and corduroy. Everyone watches what breaks. The Army's answer is not to pick a single darling. It is to standardize the best of each. Willys' engine becomes the heart, the L134. Go Devil a 134 cubic inch flathead, 4 about 60 horsepower. Generous low-end torque, simple to service, simple to rebuild. A no-nonsense carburetor, accessible plugs, short belt runs. The folding windshield stays. A flat hood you can write a map on stays. A stamped grille, strong, fast, to make easy to replace wins out. The 3-speed T84 transmission paired with a twin-stick Spicer transfer case gives high and low ranges on command. Leaf springs, live axles, drum brakes, nothing exotic, everything proven. The names shift as patterns lock in. Willys MA becomes Willys MB. Ford's standardized cousin is the GPW government 80-inch wheelbase Willys pattern. 2 badges, 1 blueprint set. Interchangeability becomes a religion. Bolt sizes match. Thread pitches match. A Willys engine will sit in a Ford frame with no drama. A Ford fender will take Willys lights without a file. The manuals speak the same voice. The drawings resolve into common geometry. That is the quiet miracle, not a clever part, but a shared language for every part. Look at the frame boxed where it must be open, where it can be. Short wheelbase, narrow track, good breakover. Curb weight around a ton, and change light enough that 4 men can shift the tail. Payload 1, 4 ton by spec, often abused in the field, with ammo crates, water cans, a radio set, and 2 extra riders anyway. The electrical system is straightforward. Blackout lighting is baked in with hooded lamps, and a rear blackout stop so a convoy can move under threat. The windshield folds flat, lower drag on road, lower profile in fire. The body is flat-panelled sheet steel, cheap to stamp, easy to patch, no compound curves to slow a depot. Serviceability rules every choice. Grease fittings are where a man with muddy elbows can reach them. The oil filter does not require a contortionist. The battery can be lifted without dismantling half the dashboard. If a transmission dies, 2 mechanics and a floor jack can drop it under a tree. If a rear axle loses a seal, the parts diagram in the glove box manual shows the stack in the right order. The Army wraps these habits into culture. Preventive maintenance checks and services at halts, tool discipline, no excuse for dry joints or loose kingpins. The Jeep is honest about what it cannot be. It is not armoured. It is not a half-track. It is not a truck for bridging a river with a single load, but it is a bridge of a different kind, one that carries orders, wire water, and authority to the exact place they must be now. The design philosophy is belligerently pragmatic. Do not chase an ideal field car. Build the field car that can be built by the 1,000, then the 10 to 1,000, then the 100 to 1,000. Accept good enough where it buys speed. Spend complexity only where it multiplies availability. Holabird signs off. Procurement surges. Willys in Toledo and Ford at multiple plants tool up hard. Jigs, fixtures, gauges, everything that makes sameness repeatable are the true secret sauce. Error-proofing creeps into the smallest places, captive nuts, where possible alignment tabs on parts that could be reversed stencils that tell a mechanic torque values in plain text. Crating schemes turn the vehicle into logistics poetry. A Jeep ship's knocked down in sub-assemblies, frame power pack axles, body nested to save space in a Liberty ship's hold. A depot gang can uncrate, bolt fill test, and hand a running Jeep to a unit in the time it takes a convoy to unload more crates. Driver training is as standardized as the steel. A new private learns double clutching on the T-84, how to keep thumbs out of the steering wheel, spokes off-road, how to shift the transfer case into low on approach rather than mid-slope, how to set the hand throttle, to keep a radio's generator happy, how to lash litters across the hood brackets without shaking a casualty to pieces. The motor sergeant teaches tire pressure discipline for sand, snow, and rock. The signal corporal shows how to route antenna lead-ins so they do not chafe on the windshield hinge. None of this requires an engineer. All of this keeps the Jeep alive. What emerges by late 1941 is not a miracle machine so much as a miracle ecosystem. A part number stamped on a bracket in Ohio matches a line in a manual in Tunisia and a crate in a depot on Oahu. The same wrench fits the same bolt regardless of who cast the block or who stamped the fender. A forward unit can cannibalize a wreck to keep 3 runners on the road before dusk. You can see the idea taking shape, a humble 4x4 designed not to impress a parade ground, but to shorten every line that matters between need and supply. The German critique that such a small, soft-skinned car cannot matter misses this core. The Jeep is not a dualist, it is connective tissue. Its design makes the connection cheap, fast, and repeatable is how fronts are won. Tooling up is not a headline. It is gauges, fixtures, and people who hit the same tolerance every time. Willys in Toledo locks into a rhythm, frames on jigs, engines down the line, bodies married to running gear with cranes that swing like metronomes. Ford spreads GPW assembly across multiple plants, River Rouge among them, so a disruption in one city does not starve a theatre months later. The blueprint set is common. The inspection steps are common. The go, no-go gauges are common. That sameness is the real speed. Numbers climb. By 1942, the 4-ton 4x4 is rolling off lines in volume measured by train length. Cars leave the plant already marked, with standardized data plates, gross weight, tire pressure, lube charts, so a driver halfway around the world is reading the same facts. Ordnance catalogues the entire machine as SNLG 503, one supply language for every nut, washer, and cable. The operator's handbook, TM 9 to 803, teaches the same start sequence, the same maintenance rhythm, the same cautions. A private in North Africa and a corporal in the South Pacific share procedures word for word. Crating turns steel into logistics. Knocked-down Jeeps pack as sub-assemblies, power pack axles, frame body nested to drink less cubic feet in a Liberty ship hold. Stencils on wood list part counts fluids needed, and a simple build order. A depot team on an English quay can uncrate, bolt fill, and test a Jeep before the next tide. Overseas, the same crate wood becomes wheel chocks, tent floors, or fuel can stands, nothing wasted. Even the hardware bags are standardized with counts that match the tech sheet, so no one hunts the pier for a missing bolt at dusk. Distribution looks like veins. Trains pull flat cars of crated or complete Jeeps into East Coast ports. Ships thread convoy lanes to Oran, Naples, Glasgow, Brisbane, Noumea. Overseas bases push them inland by rail or convoy. Motor pools assign them to battalions, regiments, division, HQs, engineer road gangs, signal companies, MPs. The Jeep becomes a common currency of movement. You do not sign out a trophy. You draw a tool from a bin that is always being refilled. Maintenance culture makes the numbers count. PMCS check oil, water, fuel belts, grease points becomes habit. A motor sergeant schedules lube intervals by mileage chalked on a windshield corner. Grease charts hang on plywood walls. Tire rotation is not a suggestion. A driver learns to listen for a dry U-joint and to feel a wandering kingpin. When something fails, the parts flow is mercilessly simple. Requisition by SNL number. Receive a part that fits install with tools the shop already has. No machining. No close enough. The interchangeability pledge is kept in the field, not in a brochure. Cost is part of tempo. The Jeep is cheap enough to risk and sturdy enough to recover. If one is shot out under a hedgerow, another is half a day away by depot truck. If a unit cannibalizes a wreck to save 3 runners, Ordnance treats that as smart practice, not vandalism. Commanders allocate Jeeps the way they allocate runners or field telephones, as expendable links that keep decisions moving. The economy of the machine, the fuel it sips, the parts it shares, the labor it saves compounds across an army. Now watch logistics meet roads. North Africa, late 1000, 942 into 1000. 943 supply routes snake inland from Algerian ports to depots near the front. Jeeps pull courier duty between dumps and division trains, running maps, priority requisitions, movement orders. Sicily and the Italian mainland hairpin mountain roads where a 2-to-1, 2-ton truck bogs or blocks jeeps slip past carrying Battalion S, 3 officers forward, observers wire crews. Normandy, after the breakout, the Red Ball Express is a storm of trucks, but its bloodstream is managed by men in Jeeps MPs, directing traffic at choke points, liaison officers racing ahead to report bridge status, road crews scouting. Detours. Fall 1944 into winter snow and glare ice in the Ardennes chains on the little wheels canvas, doors rattling blackout stacks, glowing dull, still moving, still connecting. Crude but crucial add-ons grow from need. Hoodside brackets accept stretchers, 2 on the fenders, 1 across the rear, so a Jeep becomes a mini-ambulance when ambulances cannot reach a company street. Field expedient racks carry jerrycans, water cans, radio batteries. A removable pedestal mounts a 30 cal or 50 cal for convoy defense or perimeter security. It is not a gun truck, but it is a fighting courier when ambushed. Signal units bolt down SCR 510 or SCR 610 sets on shock mounts, run antenna lead-ins through the windshield frame, add a hand throttle to keep generator output steady during long nets. The platform is plain enough that soldiers can keep grafting capability onto it without breaking what makes it reliable. Interchangeability pays off under fire. A GPW loses a starter in Italy, swap it with one from a Willys MB in the same motor pool. A Willys cracks a head in Normandy, borrow a GPW head and torque it to the spec stamped in the manual margin. A front axle assembly pulled from a wreck becomes the spare that gets a liaison Jeep back on the road before the afternoon conference. These are not isolated miracles. They are daily transactions in an army whose smallest vehicle is designed to be a parts commons. The skeptics had a point about vulnerability. The Jeep is open. It is loud enough in second. It is soft-skinned. But the trade was made consciously. Protection traded for ubiquity. Weight traded for reach. The calculus works when there are many, and there are many because factories, drawings and crates are all telling the same story. An army that can count on the same bolt pattern from Toledo to Tokyo can bet tempo against armor and win the bet often enough to matter. German units notice the side effects. Captured Jeeps are not just spoils. They are shortcuts through a problem the Wehrmacht never solved at scale. Marked with Balkenkreuz, they run messages, scout routes, ferry officers. Why? Because captured Allied dumps often contain the fuel, tires and parts to keep them going, and because the little 4x4 simply does not quit when asked to hop ruts and sneak lanes. A machine built to be common becomes valuable to friend and foe because commonality itself is power. By late 1944, the sight is ordinary and astonishing at once. Beachheads marshalling areas forward, CP's artillery parks everywhere, a peppering of identical silhouettes, windshields up or folded, hoods scuffed by mapboards, bumpers, chalked with unit codes. The Jeep is no longer an object, it is a network node with seats. Tempo does not just happen at the point of contact. It is manufactured, inspected, crated, shipped, assigned, maintained, and recirculated. That is what mass production means here, not a number but a promise kept across oceans that the smallest piece of the army will still be in the right place tomorrow morning. At first, the German reaction lives on paper. Reports from field commands dismiss the American one, 4-ton as a civilian toy, a stopgap where a proper light armored car or motorcycle combination would do. Then practice intrudes. In Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, and later France, German units discover that captured jeeps start easily, steer tightly, and squeeze through places. A Kubelwagen struggles on slick clay or rutted cart tracks. Not armoured, not imposing, but relentlessly useful. Paint over the stars, brush on a Balkenkreuz, and the Butterfahrzeug joins the message run before lunch. You can read the shift in tone, mission by mission. Couriers in divisional staffs adopt captured jeeps, because messages arrive faster when the driver can swing a 3-point turn in a stone lane without backing 100 meters. Recon elements use them for quick peeks down forest rides, because the short wheelbase hops routes and the low-range claws out of bad choices. Engineers borrow them to mark blown culverts and string warning signs. Fallschirmjäger prefer them to motorcycles on wet cobbles. The critique about vulnerability never disappears, but the field keeps choosing speed over armor when the road is narrow and the decision must move. The reason is not mystique. It is availability and serviceability meeting the battlefield. Allied dumps contain fuel in jerrycans common tire sizes, spark plugs, belts, filters, and hardware that actually fits. A German maintenance corporal with a captured parts sack can keep a jeep running because there is nothing exotic to the machine. Flathead 4. Leaf springs, drum brakes, a transmission and transfer case that can be removed with basic tools. Even when German units cannot feed or service American half-tracks or tanks they have seized, they keep the little 4x4 alive because the cost in skill and time is low and the payoff in tempo is immediate. There is also the negative lesson German staffs absorb by comparison. The Wehrmacht can build exceptional machines in small runs. It can field clever specialized vehicles. It cannot, under bombardment and fuel starvation, standardize 1,000 small things the way the Jeep program has. Bolt patterns, thread pitches, harness connectors, manual language, crate markings, tool commonality training drills. These are dull on a parade ground and decisive on a wet morning when a staff captain needs to cross 3 kilometers of lanes to reverse a traffic plan before a regiment drives into a dead end. The Jeep reveals the power of sameness, not as ideology, but as momentum you can sit in, key on, and go. Post-war proves the point in peacetime clothes. The Willys CJ2A rolls out in 1945, wearing civilian paint and farm attachments, but the bones are the MB. Farmers value the same traits soldiers did: start, pull, turn, fix. European armies carry the pattern forward. The British keep wartime stocks in service. France builds licensed successors such as the Hotchkiss M201 to fill long, unglamorous decades of staff and scout duty. NATO motor pools teach maintenance on vehicles whose logic a 19-year-old can grasp without a factory apprentice ticket. The Silhouette stamps itself on a century of light 4x4 design language: short wheelbase, upright body, flat hood, you can work on fenders, you can stand on a windshield that will fold when needed. The numbers matter because they create memory. More than 600,000 standardized Jeeps, Willys MB and Ford GPW together, passed through depots, ports and unit rolls by 1945. Every theatre sees them. Every headquarters relies on them. Photographs from Oran to Okinawa carry the same cues: bumper codes, chalked antennas, lashed mapboards scuffed across hoods, litter brackets shining on fenders, snow chains or sand channels depending on the season. Veterans remember them because they were always there when movement mattered. Historians find them in diaries as the vehicle that took a man to the worst place he ever had to go and the best news he ever had to hear. Legacy is often a tidy word. Here it is messy and practical. The Jeep teaches armies to respect the logistics of smallness. It shows that a modest platform built to a common grammar and serviced by ordinary hands can multiply the speed of everything more dramatic around it. Tanks need fuel bozers and bridge units. Bombers demand airfields and depots. The humble one, 4-ton, needs a crate, a tool roll, and a driver who will actually read a grease chart. That bargain is repeatable, and repeatable is how staffs write plans that survive the first wet road and the second changed order. Return to the hedgerow lane. Normandy again. The sound is layered, not loud. Engines idling, then revving, then easing. A stream of identical shapes refuses to bunch up. MPs with white batons carve order out of confusion. A radio net hums in the cab of a jeep with a hand throttle set to keep voltage flat. A chaplain rides the running board of a litter jeep and tells a man to hold on a little longer. A forward observer stabs a pencil into a map on a hood and shifts fire afield to the left. None of it is glamorous. All of it is the tempo that turns orders into action. German generals mocked the American Army Jeep. Then the fronts filled with them, and even the mockers made room on their roads for a captured one if they could find it. That is the story this film has followed. A small, soft-skinned, unpretentious machine turned into the battlefield's Swiss Army knife because mass production, interchangeable parts, and field discipline made it unavoidable. In total war, skepticism is a luxury. Standardization and quantity are work. The Jeep is what that work looks like when it runs on 4 small wheels and never stops showing up.